most American brands would see sales records in the 1970s, in spite of a mid-decade speed bump that some attribute to the fuel crisis and others attribute to the economic downturn. Oddly enough, most mainstream brands peaked in sales during the fuel crisis, while the more expensive brands peaked during the recession and record inflation. Chevrolet started the decade with a major strike that had a huge impact on production and therefore sales, but they remained the dominant brand throughout the decade, with Chevrolet's car sales being just under 2.6 million. In 1973, with the introduction of new mid-size models such as the Malibu and Monte Carlo, while the full-sized Impala remained America's best-selling car. Naturally, Ford remained right on Chevrolet's heels, also peaking in 1973 with car sales well over 2.3 million. Ford also had an updated mid-size Torino in 1973 and remained a leader in the personal luxury segment with the Thunderbird. Oldsmobile would have one of its most successful decades ever, setting a sales record of over 1.1 million in 1977, mostly due to the success of its several Cutlass variants, which would be downsized the following year, but also due to the newly downsized full-size models of that year. Offering similar models to Chevrolet, Pontiac would also peak in 1973 with car sales over 900,000. Thanks to its new mid-size models such as the Grand Am, the Grand Prix, and the Le Mans. As a direct competitor to Ford and Chevy, Plymouth also peaked in 1973, with just under 900,000 in car sales. And like Ford and Chevy, the success would come from both its mid-size models such as the Sebring and from its full-size Fury. But soon restructuring would take the focus off Plymouth as the bread-and-butter division. Like Oldsmobile, Buick would peak in 1977 with just under 850,000 in annual sales, with the help of downsized full-size cars such as the Electra, as well as the success of its mid-size models. Like many other brands, Mercury would see record sales, but in this case not until 1979. With the help of a newly downsized Marquis and the Capri becoming a Mustang clone, sales would reach approximately 670,000. In 1973, Dodge was still considered upmarket of Plymouth, but had similar success with its full-size and mid-size offerings, with sales of 665,000 that year. And although the brand would be moved down market to compete directly with Ford and Chevy by the end of the decade, it would be a while for buyers to take notice. In the early part of the decade, AMC was still trying to take on the big three head-to-head, and one of the last new models to do so would be the Matador Coupe, which helped AMC sales climb above 430,000 in 1974. But unfortunately, it would be all downhill for AMC from there. End of the decade downsizing seemed to do more for the more expensive brands than it did for the cheaper brands. Case in point would be Cadillac, climbing above 380,000 in annual sales by 1979, after moving to smaller yet more expensive cars. But as we go into the 1980s, the American car market would change dramatically, with a whole new string of successes and failures. As always, thanks for watching.